welcome to Taking Stock 57. I'm not sure how many of you are students of American politics, but even if you aren't, I'm guessing you've all heard of Donald Trump, the 45th President of the United States. Given that you do indeed know of whom I speak, then among all the unexpected and even frankly unbelievable things he's said or done since he was unexpectedly elected president 4 years ago, you might also be aware of his latest foray into outrageousness in the first presidential debate of 2020 with ex-Vice President Joe Biden, which took place on Tuesday night. Now, much can be said, indeed much has been said and written about the flaws in the personality, character, motivations and actions of Donald J. Trump. So much has been written, and so many other talking points in fact, that it would be impossible to pick out just a few, well, I was going to say highlights, but perhaps I should say lowlights in the life of this New York property developer. Once we start down that track, it's a long journey from his employing someone to take examinations on his behalf, through getting a spurious exemption from the draft for the military in the Vietnam War, and onwards through routinely bilking creditors via losing more money in failed businesses than any other Americans several years in succession, to cozying up to dictators, authoritarians and oligarchs whilst holding the highest office in the United States. His lies are so egregious that no one now seems to blink an eye at his public performances as Schrödinger's billionaire, in at least 15 of the last 20 years paying less federal income tax than even the worst paid of his employees, whilst simultaneously claiming to be stupendously rich. Even the multiple claims by many women that they've been sexually assaulted by Trump, claims which can hardly be said to have been discredited by his own words, secretly recorded in 2011 or 12, in which he describes his own general behaviour towards women he sees as attractive, and which would have spelled the end of pretty much any other political career in the United States, they seem to have slid off him like a fried egg in a Teflon frying pan. Oh, other frying pans are available. What I find surprising about the reactions of the commentators and journalists on both sides of the Atlantic to Tuesday evening's debacle is that they are in any sense surprised by Trump's behaviour. It would have been more surprising had he suddenly transformed into a model of decorum and politeness and come to the microphone willing to engage in the stately clash of ideas which constitutes true political debate. That instead he chose to come to the stage intent on ensuring that any such debate, any such examination of his track record or his vision for a second term as president should be drowned at birth by a welter of insults, malevolent lies and fantasy, and carefully calculated bombast and cruelty, is surely what everyone should have come to expect from Trump. He doesn't fascinate me so much. What intrigues me are his enablers. It's them I want to interrogate. It's them whose motivations I want to explore, especially the evangelical Christian Trump supporters of the Bible Belt. The first and possibly only question I want to ask as a Christian minister and a student of the Bible is this: have you ever read the Gospel of Matthew? And if you have, do you continually jump over Matthew chapter 7 verses 15 to 20? In the answer to that question might lie the answer to any questions we might have about culpability. Now, Matthew 7, 15 to 20, for those who don't have a Bible scrolling against the back of their eyelids every time they shut their eyes, says this: "Beware of false prophets, who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorns or figs from thistles? In the same way, every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus you will know them By their fruits. Now, in a way, without being all psychoanalytical about this, Trump can't help who he is, or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that he has no incentive to change who he is or how he has behaved, because throughout his life he's been indulged and very rarely, if ever, directly challenged, so that he's never suffered the true consequences of his behaviour or his life choices. If he hadn't been born into the family of a ruthless and wealthy man who indulged all his children, then on Tuesday night he might have been a retired bricklayer propping up the counter in a bar in Queens, New York, and boring the other patrons by telling them he could have been a contender if only he'd had the breaks. In a way, he's not to blame for who he is, even if he's responsible for what he's done or failed to do, and he is. But those who are really to blame, those who are truly responsible, are the ones who saw his fruit, as it were, recognised how poisonous it was, and cultivated it anyway. We've got people on this side of the Atlantic like that as well, who are also blonde. People who do not have the excuse of mental illness or personality disorder or poor upbringing. People like Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York, or Michael Cohen, Trump's personal lawyer. People like his long train of chiefs of staff and members of his cabinet. People like the vice president, Mike Pence, and former opponents like Lindsey Graham, Republican Senator of South Carolina, and Ted Cruz, Republican of Texas, who clearly recognised Trump's complete lack of suitability for any elected office back in 2015-16 publicly, but who are now amongst his staunchest supporters. It's they, the enablers, who are ultimately responsible for the phenomenon which is the presidency of Donald J. Trump. Because they saw the fruit of his life and attitudes and actions, and not only voted for him, but enabled his egregious cruelty and lack of compassion, who, if you like, are the architects of a dead America. It's they who carry the weight of the responsibility for the disaster which might well overcome the United States, and by extension, the world, if there is a second Trump term in office. But it will be the poor, the helpless and the vulnerable throughout the world who will reap the harvest of his bitter fruit. It's for the Christians and other people of compassionate faith to hold up the light of their faith, to shine on the truth about all those in every country who for personal gain and power and influence enable the evil, the venal and the corrupt to flourish. Not to act is to act. Not to protest is to collude. And that makes the collaborators and enablers and colluders far more responsible for Trump than Trump himself. By their fruits shall you know them. Stay safe, people.